How prepared is your organisation in navigating the ever-evolving landscape of cyber threats? Well, today I'm going to take you on a journey, and together we're going to dive into the heart of cybersecurity governance. My guest today is the CIO at Barracuda Networks, and she's got over 2 decades of IT leadership that spans across wide industries from fashion to sports and public broadcasting. And she also brings a wealth of experience to her role, guiding businesses through the complexities of cybersecurity in this digital-first world that we all find ourselves. So today, she's going to be sharing her insights on the current state of cybersecurity. We're going to discuss the critical governance challenges organisations face today, and talk about everything from inconsistent security policies to the intricacies of third-party access and supply chain vulnerabilities, but also offer a comprehensive view of the risks that can undermine your organisation's cyber resilience. If we've got time, I also want to explore the findings from Barracuda's latest CIO report, which reveals some pretty worrying stats, such as over half of organisations are struggling to implement consistent company-wide security policies. And also a worrying fact that only a minority out there feel confident in their ability to manage cyber risks effectively. So, are you ready to learn how your business can better prepare for, withstand, and recover from a cyber incident? Well, today I invite you to join me and my guest as together we're going to uncover practical strategies and resources that can help you and your organisation build a robust resilience framework. Before we get today's guest on, I want to talk about the fact that defence contractors face immense pressure to comply with something called CMMC 2.0 security standards, and finding a secure, easy-to-use file-sharing solution meeting those guidelines can be a major challenge. The federal government and federal systems integrators supporting the Department of Defence have similar compliance requirements for improving cybersecurity and data protection too. So if you are an IT admin in the defence sector, if you are tired of juggling complex security solutions, Kiteworks offers a game-changing approach to CMMC 2.0 compliance because their centralised policy management simplifies administration across the entire platform. So upgrade to Kiteworks and experience the perfect blend of security and simplicity. So if you're interested in accelerating your CMMC 2.0 compliance and begin addressing federal zero trust requirements with Kiteworks' universal secure file sharing platform made for defence contractors, simply visit kiteworks.com to get started. But now it's time to return to our regularly scheduled programming and welcome today's guest onto the mic. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Las Vegas, Nevada, where today you can sit down with myself and also leverage the expertise of the CIO at Barracuda Networks. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Neil, for having me. It's wonderful to be part of this podcast. So my name is Siroui Mushegian, and my career has led me from all kinds of walks of life, from media to sports to luxury fashion and beyond that. And today I have the pleasure of being Barracuda Networks CIO. I lead many areas from infrastructure and operations to enterprise data and business systems and so much more. And I'm really excited today to talk about governance challenges that companies and enterprises are facing in managing their cyber risk. So that's a bit about me.
Wow, man, amazing. It's fantastic to have you on the podcast today, especially because of your backstory there and being involved in so many different industries. And I think that is so important. But ultimately, every business is a tech business now. And I'm curious, as a CIO, how do you see the role of a CIO evolving in the context of today's heightened cyber risk environment, the arrival of AI and so much else going on there? How do you see this role evolving?
It's so interesting to have been involved in tech for as long as I have. Starting, we were chatting earlier, from the East Coast to the West Coast between, and I've seen the role of both cybersecurity evolve, but the CIO as well, of course. And, it used to be long ago that it was just kind of like the standard issue, operations, helping the enterprise from a technology point of view, kind of like, who has what systems and how are they operating and running and what software is necessary. But now you've got to add to your remit seeing around corners. So you need to make sure that you've got your perimeters locked down and as tight as possible. You have to have very tight controls. You have to make sure that you're the best of breed tools for your enterprise and your ability is used for cyber protection and detection. You have to make sure that you've got a really good, robust training program for cybersecurity so that your end users understand the what's in it for them. You have to make sure that your awareness remains high. You've got to stay in the news. You've got to be aware of what's happening out there with the cyber bad guys and understand how AI can play a part in that. AI is making you, the cybersecurity practitioner, the royal we, much more capable and able to handle the onslaught of what's coming at us. But what it's also doing is it's improving the skill sets of the bad guys at the same time. So that makes it a little, that's a double-edged sword about AI that we're trying to manage right now. So that, in addition to managing incident response, making sure that you've got strong business continuity and disaster recovery plans, and all of the other practice lines and structures that you need to build in order to have a robust cybersecurity program. Those are all now part and parcel of the daily diet of a CIO. So it's no longer just sort of the regular operations, but it's all that other stuff as well.
And you're so right in everything you said there, and especially around the news, because I think we're seeing high-profile breaches every week. We know that every business knows that they need to have a proactive rather than a reactive approach to cyber. They need to train their staff better to finally retire that horrible blame game and phrase that, hey, employees are the weakest link in security. Then we've got good AI versus bad AI. Well, on the flip side of all that stuff that we know, over half of organizations are struggling to implement consistent security policies. So I've got to ask, what do you believe are the key obstacles in helping businesses achieve that consistency needed to offer that robust protection?
Yes, you are so right. To implement these policies, because the biggest thing that I see, and I've seen not just where I am today, but across my career, is this perceived convenience or inconvenience of establishing these security policies. So, for example, if you want to put some sort of just-in-time access as part of your security policies, and you've got some engineers that are used to having, full admin rights for everything, and all of a sudden you lock something down a little bit at a time or a lot or whatever the case may be, that is going to be perceived as inconvenient. So humans are interesting because they'll try to work around all of that stuff that you try to put in place to keep everything safe and sound. And so going back to how can you get past that, it's about creating awareness. So you have to make sure that you've got your stories ready to go, that you have people with feeling like they've got their skin in the game, that they're part of creating the security posture of your entire company, and the operations that they do and their daily work are, they've got to make sure that they are careful and that they follow the policies and procedures that you're laying down before them, because they hopefully, as you have gone to the trouble of educating them, understand why it is that that's happening. So, you've got to have educational programs, training like we talked about. And then on top of that, you layer in the places where executives may not understand the importance of these policies. So sometimes not having the tops down approach and support can create friction and a struggle. So you make sure that you've got your communication plans on all angles for all levels, because that's really going to help you. Create a what's in it for them scenario. Try to expand on the power of and. Can we go fast and be safe rather than can we go fast or be safe? Implementing passwordless mechanisms can be sometimes more efficient and secure. So you give them a little bit of a give and you have a little bit of take where, maybe you're providing some additional lockdown of some admin access or so on. And then people tend to understand that the communication must be strong and you can't discount the importance of it.
And one of the reasons I was excited to invite you on the podcast today was after reading a quite frightening stat from Barracuda's CIO report that highlighted only 43% of organizations out there are actually confident in their ability to manage cyber risks. So frightening stat, but did that surprise you? And what steps can businesses take to maybe boost that confidence and boost that figure for next year's report?
That's a good question to ask. What did I think of that statistic? And because I have come from so many different walks of life, meaning, I've worked at companies that are pretty big, came from Ralph Lauren. I've worked at the NBA, and I've also worked at I've worked in nonprofit. So worked in public media for PBS in New York City. And I've seen the spectrum of places where you've got a large reserve of budget to help you put forward an amazing cybersecurity program. And I've been in situations myself personally where I am trying to find budget from every corner of the pocketbook to create a cybersecurity posture and program. And so it wasn't that big of a surprise to me to see that statistic. 43%, that's under half, obviously. But, you just kind of have to say to yourself, okay, these companies, thankfully, they're being honest about how they're seeing themselves. We had almost 2,000 respondents, and the respondents were people, not just, off the street types of people. These were the CIOs of the companies that responded typically. So we feel very confident in these statistics that we're working with here. But what can people do? The question is, what can you do to boost this confidence? So we were talking about communication with executive stakeholders. That's, to me, one of the key components of getting yourself in a better spot, because as we're saying, budget can be a factor. So, having a cybersecurity program doesn't come for free. I mean, it's not free 99 out there. You can't do everything on a shoestring. And you do need to have your executive management understand the importance of having a cybersecurity program. And by the way, this is, as I said, on a spectrum. If you're a smaller company, the same thing applies. Larger companies, same thing. But, obviously it's a sliding scale. So having a narrative that explains all of the issues that can arise if you do nothing, is really important. Finding incidents out there that have caused companies that are similar to your own, that have, caused issues, can help resonate your message forward. And then, if your budget is constrained, how can you manage around that? There are lots of resources out there. You can also, if you're a situation where you're a fractional CIO or a fractional CISO, you can leverage things like the CISA or CISA has a program where they will run a free tabletop exercise for your company. You can leverage all the toolkits that are available on the NIST site and so on and so forth. There's just a ton of resources out there to help you establish processes and procedures so that you can boost the confidence and boost your cybersecurity program internally. So, there's a lot of stuff you can do that is free. Sometimes training programs can just be about the amount of effort that you put in. Developing a risk register That's something that you can follow processes to create on your own. And then having that risk register available so that you can review it with your board regularly, that goes into helping you garner support for budgets maybe in the future, but at least awareness.
And boosting security in any organization of any size is also heavily reliant on so many external factors as well, which we don't talk about enough. So I'm curious, what governance challenges do you see organizations facing when managing so many different areas, from third-party access and supply chain security? There's a lot going on there. It's not as simple as what's going on in my organization. It stretches far and wide, doesn't it?
It sure does. When you say those things, when you talk about third-party access and supply chains, we're talking about the attack surface of your company. Yeah. And sometimes people don't really understand what that means. But if you think about it in terms of the number of tools and applications, SaaS apps mostly, in this day and age, that make up your portfolio of tools that help run your company. And you think to yourself, oh, it's not just my, like Google Docs or Word or Excel or whatever, like Zoom. It's so much more than that. Oftentimes companies have hundreds, like a few hundred applications that are in use at any given time that are making up the portfolio of tools that people are using to get their jobs done. And wouldn't you know that most of the time, the IT people like myself don't know about all of them. Yeah. And so that's really where things get scary. And to go to your question about governance challenges, if you don't have a whole procedure and policy that has been communicated outward to your constituents and employees, they'll continue to use freeware, or they'll continue to log into various applications, maybe with a personal email account, or, they'll use the free version of something that doesn't have the security protocols that you need it to in order for it to be at least at a safe level for your environment. But that's just the baseline. What you're missing without having a full process and procedure is the ability to review all of these applications, tools, vendors that are part of your ecosystem. And by having a review that lets you take a look at what types of companies you are allowing to be part of your infrastructure. And just like you as a cybersecurity practitioner are trying your level best to be as safe and secure as possible, you are leveraging to help run your business to have the same frame of mind. So doing these vendor assessments that are part of this process of governance for third parties and supply chain is super important, because that's going to allow you to check to see what kind of cybersecurity standards these companies have. Do they have the right types of attestations that are important for you? What types of internal controls do they have? And those are the types of things that you want to be able to know about before you onboard any vendor or application. And then once you do that, you want to do the rinse and repeat, where you're regularly going back and reviewing the portfolio of vendors and tools that you have in your enterprise. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's really about having the policies, the procedures, and then going back to this theme of communication, making sure that people understand why it is important that they are part of this process, that they don't try to go in the back door to start using something that you don't know about, that you can't control.
And if I go back 10 years, there was always a fear that in IT, especially that fear that in the boardroom, they didn't always see the value in something that might happen or might not happen, especially when looking at the ROI of cybersecurity. We all know that value, of course, but not everyone could see it. So in your experience, has that attitude changed? And what role do you see management support playing in successful implementation of these company-wide security policies that are desperately needed?
management participation and understanding is paramount to the success in my experience, and across all of my friends and compatriots who sit in this role with me, who I know far and wide, they will tell you that without executive sponsorship and understanding, it's very difficult to have successful implementation of company-wide policies, because the tops-down approach is really what's going to help supply that extra oomph that you need. The bottoms up is okay, but you've got to have the tops down as well. So having them understand is really important. We've talked about that a little bit earlier throughout our podcast so far, but digging in more deeply, you're asking have I seen a shift? And I have. I've seen, like even publicly traded companies, non-publicly traded companies, you've got a board regardless that is typically, thankfully, usually made up of people who are also operating an audit board, perhaps, or there's a cybersecurity committee that's kind of a subset of the board. And they're looking at the policies and procedures that you have across your company. A lot of this is dictated by the various, government requirements that are coming down, whether or not you live in the UK or you live in the United States or anywhere else. There are new requirements that are important that all companies, regardless of whether or not you're publicly traded or you're small in size, but they have to follow and comply with. So I'm starting to see a real shift because, you've got to have understanding. So I'm seeing that the boards are now up-leveling themselves to more and deeper understanding. But of course, it's still our responsibility to help underpin that with consistent messaging and, just continuing to bring them in closer to the message.
And I think we often hear about the financial implications of a cyber breach, but I've seen so many different stories that also talk about the reputational impacts that can go on for a number of years. So how do you approach the task of preparing an organization to not just withstand, but also recover from a significant cyber incident?
So I love this question because what the answer is a few things, but one that I want to highlight is the importance of conducting regular tabletop exercises. And what that means is getting together all of the executive stakeholders or everybody that is listed in your incident response plan, sitting them around a table, either in person or virtually or a combination of those two things. And you're going through a mock incident. You're actually taking it from the very beginning seedlings of something happening all the way to your recovery steps. And every single person that's in that room with you is having some level of responsibility and accountability to ensuring that that incident has gotten to a resolution state. So making sure that you run these regularly helps elevate the understanding of what people have to be aware of and be prepared to handle when something comes at you. And, like the one that I like to call out a lot of times is your communications person. Yeah. Typically, your communications person is not in the technology area. They're usually part of, HR or marketing or some other team like that. Those are the folks that are going to have to, heaven forbid you get to a state where you have to do this, but they're the ones who are going to have to write a press release, for example. And if they are unpracticed at that, that's something that you're going to have to struggle with in the midst of dealing with an incident where if you already had that as an understood item as part of the process of dealing with an incident, you wouldn't have to spend so much time over on that. So I think, preparing your organization with running these tabletops, it seems like such a small thing to do because, it's a pretend incident, but pick something that could be real. Don't pick something like, Martians landed outside, pick something that could really happen to you and take that run that to ground. Make sure that you've really, looked at all angles of that particular incident. And it will definitely spark a lot of thought across every area of all of the people that are sitting there at that table. So that's one big thing that you can do. There's a lot more, but that's a big one. Of course, having your BCP-DR plans at the ready, at least starting to doc goes on and on. But I love the tabletop exercise discussion.
Absolutely invaluable advice. I can almost hear light bulb moments going off around the world, and it makes so much sense to have those tabletop exercises, bringing in the comms team, having them being aware of what might happen, how to create that press release, etc. It makes so much sense to have all that in place, and to try and provide even more valuable takeaways or actionable tips for anybody listening. Are there any other practical resources or strategies that you'd recommend to businesses aiming just to improve their overall cyber resilience? Because I feel you're on a roll there with that last answer.
Yes. So resources are at the ready. The internet's an amazing thing. And especially given the fact that there are so many agencies out there that are publishing information that is available to you, whether you live in the United States, in the UK, or whatever. You've got a government agency that is, incented to supply information that you can use to help build your cybersecurity practice. There in the US, there's CISA. NIST is amazing. NIST just announced their new cybersecurity framework 2.0, which has elevated the last version 1.2. And it's, I invite everybody out there to just go to that website and go through the repository of documents that can be used to help underpin your cybersecurity program. Incredible stuff out there. You can lean into resources and recommendations from third parties that you've got as part of your own framework. If you've got a managed XDR, for example, or other people that are knowledge leaders that you can, tap into. Also, if you happen to have subscriptions from Gartner, Forrester, Infotech Research Group, any number of those other agencies out there that have frameworks and toolkits you can use to help. Those are great resources. And then taking that to the strategy level, start somewhere. If you can afford to have an outside expert perform a risk assessment or cyber audit or some sort of pen test, that can help you figure out where you've got gaps, and it can help you put your roadmap together of priorities. So that'll give you a place to start. If you do not have access or can't afford any of those, then lean in heavily to the resources that I just mentioned above, NIST, CISA, so on and so forth. They've got excellent frameworks, and you can definitely get started there. I mentioned the word roadmap. Develop one. It can be your glossy brochure when you go to talk to your executives. So it's clear where your head is, and you can show at any given moment where you are on your journey. It can also highlight where you might need investments. So that's my recommendation on that.
Again, absolutely priceless. And we started the podcast today talking about your vast experience, which has taken you across so many diverse sectors, from fashion to sports to public broadcasting. And as we come full circle, I'm going to ask you to look back at your career now. And how did all of these collective experiences inform your current approach to IT and cybersecurity at Barracuda? I would imagine there's been quite a few moments of reflection, but anything you can share around them?
Yes. So the first job I had in a really big company, was I started my technology career in a much smaller software company. But the first time I worked for a very large company, it was for Time Inc. when it existed, which is the magazine division of Time Warner at that time. And the role that I was hired to do was to roll out secure IDs on our dial-up VPN infrastructure. So that was a long time ago. And things have changed a lot since then. But when you're talking about times that I can kind of have reflective moments along the way of seeing where, like what has happened and where things diverge or are different, what I can say is, having worked across all of these different sectors and having been around long enough to have seen just the very seedlings of cybersecurity and then have it grow into such a massive state that it is today. What I can tell you is regardless of the company that you're in, the shape, the size, the components, what your industry is, that cybersecurity is foundational. It's foundational for every organization, regardless of size and industry. And cybersecurity in general is foundational for human beings. So understanding how you should be operating to protect yourself as best as possible shouldn't change from when you are at home to when you go to work. All of that should be at the same level. You should be as vigilant, regardless of whether or not you're sitting at home and opening your Gmail account and responding to some sort of email you think you got from your bank, or when you're at work and you are trying to navigate through different policies and procedures that are there. It's just important that cybersecurity exists everywhere and that you have the respect, regardless of whether or not you're in a tiny company or a large company. It is super duper important.
Okay, fantastic advice. And we have been very serious today. So before I let you go, it's time to have a little bit of fun with you. And I always ask my guests to leave everyone listening with either a book that they'd recommend or means something to them or inspired them that we can add to an Amazon wish list, or a song that we can add to our Tech Talks Daily Spotify playlist. Guilty pleasures are allowed. You can choose either, but what would you like to leave everyone listening and why?
So I try to read some books that are not technology related. And one that I just read is called The Advantage. And it is by an author, Patrick Lencioni. It is a fascinating book. It's about organizational health and how that is according to this author, and I really believe what is in here, how that is the most important thing to run a business. So it offers practical advice of the way companies can attain organizational health. And it's not just about strategy or marketing or technology at all. He talks about how organizational health is so important, and that leads have to overcome biases for sophistication and quantification. So they can't, assume that they need to measure everything in order to see the benefits of just looking at this organizational health. But I'll just leave you with the 4 disciplines that are part of this book, and hopefully it will entice you to read it. It's not that long, and I thought it was very fascinating, and I love it. But number 1 is to build a cohesive leadership team. Number 2, to create clarity. 3, to over-communicate clarity. And number 4 is to reinforce clarity. So the themes we talked about today in terms of communication, I feel like are echoed in what I just said in terms of these 4 disciplines for The Advantage. Anyway, I loved it. So recommendation is that.
Awesome. I will get that added straight to our Amazon wish list. And we've covered so much in a short amount of time today. So where is the best place for listeners to find you or your team online, or just dig a little bit deeper on anything we talked about today?
I'll tell you the 2 places to go. Number 1, follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where you'll see any of the thought pieces that I publish, or any of the podcasts like this one that I get invited to. And thank you again, Neil, for this. But even more so, go to the Barracuda site and subscribe to the Barracuda blog. There are countless topical blog posts that we release all the time, and I think you'll find them fascinating. So either of those 2 places.
Awesome. I'll add links to both of those so people can find you nice and easily and keep up to speed with everything at Barracuda. And I can't thank you enough for coming on here and discussing the best ways for businesses to prepare for, withstand and respond to, and ultimately recover from cyber incidents, and also talking about the top governance challenges facing organizations in managing risk, but most importantly, leaving some priceless advice and actionable tips and key takeaways for people to go away and try some of these things to improve their cyber resilience. Just a big thank you from me for sharing your story and some incredible tips. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Neil. It was a pleasure.
So what steps will you and your organization take to fortify your defense against cyber threats? Because as we wrap up my conversation with a fantastic guest today, one key takeaway still resonates. Cybersecurity is not just an IT concern. It is a business imperative that requires executive commitment and a proactive rather than reactive approach to cybersecurity. Yep, you are expected to look around corners now. And I think my guest provided us with so many incredible, valuable insights into the evolving role of the CIO cybersecurity, but also the challenges of implementing those consistent security policies. But I think it was her actionable tips, the resources that she shared today are just essential tools for any organisation looking to enhance its cyber resilience. So I think this is one of the great things about a podcast, that yes, you can listen passively and hear the stories of guests, but my guest today left very valuable takeaways that you can use in your organisation. So if you have not had a tabletop exercise about your customer database getting hacked, how your organisation would respond, if you've not worked with your marketing and comms team on how you would communicate that message to the great wide world, if you've got to put a press release together, all those things could be in hand right now. So over to you. What will you do to ensure your organisation is prepared to meet some of those challenges ahead? I want you to reflect on the strategies discussed today and consider how they could be integrated into your cyber risk management framework. And I also invite you to share your tips. Maybe you're doing a lot more and want to highlight something that we've not covered today and think we may have missed. There's a couple of ways you can do this. You can sit down with me and we can talk about it for 30 minutes. And you can do that by emailing me at techblogwriter@outlook.com. We'll get that conversation started. But equally, if you've just got a couple of quick questions or quick takeaways, slide into the DMs on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to share it with everyone. But that's it for today. So much food for thought on my side and a lot I'm going to be taking away. But more than anything, thank you for joining me and my guest today. And until next time, stay vigilant, stay secure. And hopefully if you enjoyed yourself, join me again bright and early tomorrow with another guest. Hopefully speak with you then.